Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word in danger of losing its meaning altogether. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Reggie James. As the founder of Digital Clarity, Reggie leads a pioneering consultancy that empowers businesses to achieve their marketing goals. The company, known for its strategic insights and innovative use of technologies, stands at the forefront of driving marketing change and creating lasting value for its clients. Reggie, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I'm looking forward to getting to talk to you about innovation and all sorts of other things, I'm sure.
Jared, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've listened to some of your shows. I'm a big fan of some of the topics you touch on, especially innovation. I think it's core to a lot of things. So I'm delighted to be here, even though it's a little bit late here. You're in Atlanta, right?
I am. I appreciate you joining us from across the pond.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, let's dive right in then. What, to your mind, is innovation?
Well, that is a great question. And I think it means so many things to so many different people. For me, innovation, certainly in the realm that I operate in, I suppose it's the process or methodology of establishing successful ideas to create value constantly. I think the world is changing. The only constant, I suppose, is change, as people always say. For me, it's the ability of creating value and defining, depending on what you're working on. In my case, I work with B2B tech leaders in sales and marketing. Mm-hmm. And that world never stands still, and they are constantly innovating. And when I meet the C-suite or ask them, and they say, oh, we're innovating this, we're innovating that, and I ask them to define innovation, they find it quite challenging. But I give them a few prompts that make them think about what and why they have to continually innovate and put a plan together of innovation to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can imagine there are a couple different forms of value from that conversation. One might be the CEO's thought process around articulating what innovation is. The other I could imagine is the CEO finding gaps or mismatches between his or her definition of innovation and maybe their leadership team or the industry or somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that always comes out of the sessions that we do is that information can sometimes be siloed. So therefore, when we talk about innovation or when we talk about the different aspects of their business, one of the key things that come out is that of communication. So as George Bernard Shaw very rightly said, the challenge with communication is the assumption that it is taking place. And within management teams and within board level, there is a huge amount of people making assumptions that the team around them understand what they are saying, and secondly, understand what they mean by terms like innovation. So if I was to go into an organization and ask 10 different people what innovation meant, be it in sales, marketing, in human capital, in finance, wherever it might be, I will probably get 20 different answers.
That's right.
Because they all have a perception of what innovation is and how to apply innovation. And if I ask them to name a company that's innovative, you'll get the usual suspects always come up. Apple, Amazon, they used innovation to do this. They launched Alexa. They never stopped. They used to sell books. All of this kind of scenario. And I think the reality is that innovation and what it means is changing its meaning. It's continually changing its meaning, and it now has a different meaning to different people. But I think at its core, it is still very much about change, about adapting to change, and about putting plans in place to make their product, service, or solution better. And as I say, Jared, in my area that I operate in, it's very much on the understanding of who the company is, what they actually do, why they do what they do, and trying to define a value proposition. And through that, there's a lot of touch points on innovation that come out of that. Mm. And then we start drilling into all those different kind of areas. And certainly in marketing, there are lots of innovation. There's lots of things that have been driven by change, where companies have to continually innovate to not just thrive, but to survive, especially in this day and age. And if you're not innovating, if you don't have a plan of innovation baked into what you're doing, you're going to struggle. And that's why it's so key.
That's well said. I wonder if it really has, what I love about kind of the way you laid it out is you mentioned that the definition of innovation is evolving, is changing, which I hadn't really thought about, but is an interesting perspective because it's such a dynamic world we live in today. And I mean, it's always been dynamic in different ways, but the acceleration of certain types of technology have almost warped the definition of innovation, the gravity that they've generated in terms of attention and in terms of impact on society and culture. And I can see how that has kind of shifted our definition of what innovation is. So I think you're spot on in that regard. Mm-hmm. You talked about having a plan for innovation and the importance of that, and it is critical. I wonder if it's more of a challenge to have a plan for innovation today than, say, 5 years ago or 15 years ago.
Again, a great question. I think we have no choice. Mm-hmm. So we don't look at innovation as a holy grail or a separate entity. We talk about innovation as it being baked into everything that we talk about. So when we go in, we have a very clear sort of 4-part process that's been honed in over sort of 30 years of marketing and experience. And if you add in the people that have been involved in that, it's even more. So there's a lot of depth when we talk to companies, but we can see very clearly when we go deeper into the weeds where those challenges lie. But those change, the need for innovation is driven by change. It's driven by not the change within their own organization. That's normally a lack of change, but it's the innovation that's thrust upon them. So if you look at post-pandemic, in our world, the way B2B buyers move, how they engage, certainly in our arena, B2B software and tech leaders, it's completely different. They are very much in control. They have their own processes. And it's up to the organization that's, in essence, selling what they're selling to educate and create and understand the touch points that those buyers move in that they weren't doing, in answer to your question, 5 years ago.
I see.
So 5 years ago, the world was a very different place. And in another 5 years, it may be completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure it certainly will be. So I think 5 years ago, the way people approached innovation or what innovation meant was that unless you were having an innovation specialist coming in and talking about innovation in your software, innovation in your processes and everything else, I think innovation now should be, in many good organizations, taken as a given and rolled into so many other different things. And we certainly use that. So everything we do is about innovation in many ways. We have to start at the basics and understand where the organization is before we can sort of apply all of that. But that in itself is innovation in action, if you like.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. It seems like you're viewing innovation almost as a way of seeing the world or a way of looking at change, and not necessarily as a department or a job description or a function within an organization.
Absolutely, Jared. And I would also add, we've got to mention those 2 letters, AI, because that's the biggest driver in innovation. I read something this morning about the number of jobs, I think, and don't quote me on this, but there was 2 or 3 technology companies that hadn't been in the news about some of the streamlining they're making due to AI. But certainly companies like PayPal, certainly companies like, this is all in the public domain, some others, Microsoft obviously and various others, but just this year alone, it's been quite a large amount of shift to their sort of human capital requirements. But then equally, they're creating roles in other environments. So if you're not innovating, if you're not adapting to change constantly, you are going to struggle. And I think that part of the challenge for people within the human resource side is that cutting too much means that they can't develop and innovate as they should.
Right.
And that was born out of some of the numbers that came out of Google's quarter. They cut a whole lot of staff within the advertising, engineering, all that kind of area. And of course, in that way, people moved elsewhere. And I don't know if they'd actually allowed for that. So now they're kind of playing catch up with Bard or Gemini, as it's now called, and building all those things. But all of those are part of innovation. You know, innovation never stands still. As we said already, it's always moving. But I honestly believe that innovation now is baked into everything that we do, or everything an organization should be doing to stay ahead, to be a leader within their field, but also how they measure, how they do things, how they used to do things, how they benchmark, how they used to benchmark, how they benchmark now, how they report on things.
Yeah.
It's all changed. It's all changed.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think the point about benchmarking is something that is not talked about very much in the world of innovation. I think the broader business world has gotten so accustomed to the whole case study, external benchmarking, reading books about things that other people have done, bringing external resources in to tell us about how it happened at another company or what have you. And to your point about innovation and the fact that it's always changing and evolving, I always find there's a couple of challenges with that. One, I think it's a point in time. And so that will never, you never step into the same river twice. That sort of mindset of, okay, well, that happened in 1985 or 2020, and it's a different world today. And the other challenge, I think, is you never get the whole story when you do external benchmarking. You never get everything. And it's hard not to get revisionist history when you go to have that conversation. I had success, and what I think led to that success may not have been what made me successful. And so even asking me, what you're getting is my filtered rationalization of these outcomes. I just wonder about the value of external benchmarking in the world of innovation in 2024.
That's such a great point, Jared. I mean, I find all the things you're saying there resonate very strongly with me. There is a rose-tinted kind of view of things when people look at the past. I think they feel that, well, we did it that way back then. Why can't we do that now? And to your point, there's so many different factors that impact what was working then. And if you're trying to benchmark against something way back then, you can't, because it's a different world.
Right. You say way back then. I feel like that period, like what constitutes way back then, is getting shorter as we move through time.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, who would have thought 12 months ago that OpenAI would be a thing and not something in a Philip K. Dick novel to do with Blade Runner or anything like that?
Right.
Let alone, 2 years ago when the internet came around and the likes of Yahoo and AOL and all these, there was huge acceleration and a lot of companies did very, very well out of it and lots of organizations supporting that. When the likes of social media came about, the uptake compared to things like the adoption of television or anything like that was huge. So people like Meta with its Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram brands had huge adoption. And I think I read somewhere that even, I'm trying to remember what the new Twitter type thing is.
Oh, Threads.
Threads. I think that's touched 100 million or a billion or something crazy already.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that nothing stays still. And comparing something to even 6 months ago, even the revisionist history part is so important, and all the other elements that have no bearing in terms of a process are such large factors that sometimes it can be a little bit of luck, a little bit of being in the right place at the right time, a little bit of geopolitical things that are happening, etc.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that makes things take off. I mean, there was a war in Ukraine, and then suddenly what's going on in the Middle East? There's an election going on. There's a shortage of microprocessors and semiconductors. There is the stuff happening in the South China Sea with Taiwan and various other things. And that's nothing to do with day-to-day activity, but it has a huge bearing on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has an impact, an indirect impact in a way. There's lots of different touch points that create ripples, the ripple effect. And there's all these black swan moments that are happening out there that, of course, they're going to have a sort of El Nino sort of effect, that you're just sitting there getting on with your life, and then suddenly something happens and the world has changed forever. And it's like, hey, what happened?
Right.
What happened to Web3 and the Bored Ape NFTs?
Yeah.
Everyone was sort of piling into that. And then again, the kind of Bitcoin bubble that everyone thought was going away. And suddenly the war happens. People are buying into Bitcoin and gold. Suddenly that's accelerating. As the old saying goes, the only constant is change. And I think great innovators know that and understand that, and so are constantly innovating. And that's where you see value. And I think you've got to take it on as a positive, as a change, and always be looking to shape that in your processes, shape that in your organizations and everything else like that. I know you're ex-McKinsey.
Oh, yeah.
For your sins. And someone was sharing with me a McKinsey process, which in its day was groundbreaking.
Right.
But today, because organizational structures have changed so much, they just wouldn't resonate with the modern world. And I think that's true of what we talk about now and a week ago. In 6 months, who knows what things are going to be like.
And I think that's such an important point. I think that's why your approach to things makes so much sense to me, is being a more of an advisory, consultative, meeting people where they are, engaging them on their work and their situation versus bringing pre-structured, pre-designed processes, pre-written, pre-organized case studies and examples and things. I really think that the future is more of a consultative advisory world than a traditional structured management consulting world. And the people that will thrive in it, I think, are people with an innovation mindset who also bring more of a coaching, problem-solving mindset to the work they do. Because it's really today, I think, more about resilience and being able to respond to things versus feeling the need to react to things. And I think the way you go about your work really sets your clients up well to be able to do that and to feel supported in that.
Thank you, Jared. And again, we've really had no choice, like how our clients have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot squeeze a square peg into a round hole. Every organization is different. Every structure is different. You've got different people with different thoughts and ideas that are all important. It's very important for us when we go into organizations to be sensitive to that. Rather than force change, we want to bring people along with us so they understand that where they are now and where their organization is now shouldn't really reflect where they should be and where they want to be.
Right.
And really our role is A, to understand where they are, B, to understand what they need to get to where they want to. But also when they talk about what they want, is to be clear about whether they're ready to have change. Everyone wants the 6-pack, but they're not willing to get up at 5 a.m. and do the run.
Right.
So it's whether they have the appetite for change and to apply the things that we ask them to apply, or whether they're going to go back under the duvet and revert to type and go back to what they were doing. And as we always say, in a year from now, you'll wish you started today.
Right.
And especially in today's world, Jared, and I'm sure you find it yourself, that the world is, people like us, we need to be far more vocal, far more encouraging to talk to people about innovation and be open about innovation and show them how innovation can add value to what they're doing, as opposed to it being some methodology.
I think you're right. And it's important that it kind of takes that next step in maturation beyond an industry or a function or a department or a title. I think we're kind of stuck in that mode. A lot of things follow when they move into the corporate space, they follow that art. But I feel like innovation has gotten stuck in this narrowly siloed, defined sort of bucket of innovation is the application of new technologies within companies.
Yes.
And that is just such a narrow slice of what innovation is and what it could be. And it cuts so many people in the organization off from the benefits of that way of thinking, those frameworks, those tools, those mindsets, that perspective. You talked about people naming companies that are innovative companies. I always ask, like, okay, well, have you done business with these companies? How does their payroll work? How does their procurement organization work? Where's the innovation in that? What's their diversity strategy? Where's the innovation in that? There are entire sections of how, quote unquote, innovative companies work that are stuck in the 70s. So I couldn't agree with you more. It's critical that it's viewed as a mindset, a way of working, a way of viewing change, and a way of addressing change. And I think that part of that is a bit of a soapbox, but I think part of the reason AI has had this outsized effect is that we left innovation stuck in the technology realm for too long. And so now acceleration in the technology realm has outstripped our advancements in ethics and organizational design and the arts and a lot of other things. And so AI is having this outsized effect on culture where other technological advances haven't, because in the past, they were all innovating as well.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, we find that it's never a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that impact any organization, culture, brand, what do they stand for, all of those things. And we find innovation in brand. So a lot of organizations are going back to brand because they're realizing that brand is sometimes what they have. You know, what do we call ourselves? How do we describe our values? What's our website going to look like? What materials are we going to use? What's our internal principles? What tone of voice should we have? All of these different things are all elements of innovation. But equally, they are softer skills, but they are very difficult to define. And you cannot use technology to come up with the answers for those particular questions, if that makes sense.
It does.
Those questions, they're sometimes, value propositions, some of the hardest questions to ask. You see people just going crazy trying to explain what it is they actually do. They had an idea somewhere down the line, and now they don't. And it's a very much a mimicking competitor or, oh, yeah, a Me Too kind of marketing. Oh, yeah, we do that as well, and we do that, and we do that, when really they should be doing less.
Right.
And if they're confused, how do their potential customers feel?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's something that we come across all the time. So it's a very interesting space to be in right now.
I can imagine.
But yeah, you're right. I think we've relied too much on technology and innovation. But there's so many other elements that are so important for companies to grapple with and have a process to deal with. So yeah, I totally agree. Fantastic.
So what you said there sparked the thought about sort of how innovation gets talked about, as you said, gets talked about and gets kind of applied to thinking and brands and all those things, helping people see their branding and their product offering and how they position it, what materials they use, all those things as part of their innovation process. I wonder if there is a point of view that allows space for brands, products, services, all those things to be able to chase the simplicity that we're talking about, the elegance, doing less, while also still, for lack of a better term, impressing investors and folks on the other side of the fence. Because I feel like sometimes that complexity comes from that world. If it doesn't sound like it does everything, I'm not going to get funded.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I always think that it goes without saying, the simpler something is, the better something is. Because the ability to make complexity look simple is a real art form.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the things that we try and do. People believe that it's the other way around, that if you try and make something far more sophisticated, then it's the emperor's new clothes.
Mm.
You go into somewhere, into an organization, and everyone's talking about methodologies and different components and building blocks and all these different things and product renderings and goodness knows whatever terms they come up with. Then you sort of ask a question like, sorry guys, can you explain to me what it is you actually do?
Right.
And it could be something like, well, we make widgets. Oh, right. Okay. For bolts that go onto wheels. And it's suddenly you demystify a lot of that stuff. And if you demystify it, guess what? You're making it easier for your customers to buy.
Right.
Customers are very much in control. But if you try and overcomplicate things, people just feel they have to justify either a price, keeping things very, very high, by making things complex or trying to make them sophisticated.
Right.
But really, real sophistication comes in simplicity. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I think when the iPhone came out, very few people actually used it to make calls. And that in itself changed the world, really. I mean, I've heard it described as the remote control to people's lives. But I think the reality of it is there's very few products or solutions that are like that. It's an exception to the rule. But I think most things could be simplified. Most things can be. And I think part of innovation is doing that, is cutting through the noise and actually getting to the bones of what your product or service does and actually understanding who you are, where you fit into the ecosystem, if we were to do the classic Venn diagram, and understanding where you fit or you assume you fit and being the best within that space. Not trying to be in everyone else's space, be the best in that because you have the FOMO, a fear of missing out.
Right.
Be the best you can and others will try and chase you. It's a slight, I'm trying to think of the term, but it's counterintuitive to most thinking. And I think you have to have that sort of intellectual humility to actually say, well, actually, let's not over-intellectualize this. Let's get back down to basics. What is it we actually do?
Right, right. I love that intellectual humility concept. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what we try and get our clients. We always ask them right at the beginning, leave the egos at the door. I'm going to ask you some rather tough questions, but very simple questions. We don't expect you to have the answers. When we ask 5 C-suite people to write down what it is they do, and all 5 of them turn the paper around and they're all different, you're suddenly seeing where the problem lies.
Right, right.
Yeah, so I'm hoping your viewers and your listeners are going to get something out of our discussions because I think we're touching on some good areas of looking at innovation in different ways, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I think so. It's been a great conversation and I've taken things away from it myself from what you've shared. So I appreciate that.
Likewise.
Any other pieces of advice that you might have for folks as they think about innovation?
Yeah, I think what you thought of innovation, think again, I would say. It's not what it was when you read about it in a book or saw that YouTube video. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. The only constant is change, as in life, as in business, in everything that we do. So therefore, innovation never stands still. So go back, take a step back, re-understand what you thought about innovation, how it applies to your organization, and really just take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at what you actually do and the areas in which you can innovate. And I think that's one thing. Write it down. I always feel that if you draw something or write it down, it's a lot easier than typing it into notes or something and visualizing.
Yeah. Process. Yeah, it feels like.
It is. It's more tactile and it allows you to have a different approach. So, so hopefully that's a bit of simple but good advice and not always easy to do. It's always a good start point.
Yeah, I mean, simple and easy are very different things. And I love that insight from you about sophistication.
Yeah.
Sometimes simplicity is the essence of sophistication.
Very much so. I mean, we say that on our program. It's available to everyone, but it's not for everyone. You've got to want change. You've got to apply the things that people with 30 plus years experience trying to help you, but you still think that you want to do it your way, then there's going to be a disconnect.
Right.
So that's what I think. Go back to basics. Remember why you went into the business. Get back to the core of the business and then start looking at those areas. And I think that helps.
Great stuff. Reggie James, thank you so much for your time today and the insights you shared and your perspective on innovation and life. It was an enjoyable conversation and I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there a place people can learn more about your organization or hear more from you?
Absolutely, they can, Jared. And firstly, let me just say it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. I'm really grateful for being a guest here on this podcast. People can reach me on LinkedIn. Just type in Reggie James, or they can visit the website, digital-clarity.com, or they can type into Google Reggie James at Digital Clarity, and I'll be up there. I've got lots of thoughts and views on a whole variety of different things, and I'd love to share them with you. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Jared.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get more insights from innovators across the world. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional content and conversation. I hope to see you there. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.